Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela and Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Today's guest on the podcast is Dan Pfeiffer. He was on the podcast in episode 131, where we discussed heavy weather sailing. In this episode, we had a great conversation about what to do when things do not go as planned.
Great. And Bela, I loved episode 131. It was one of my favorites, and I'm happy that Dan was willing to come back and record another episode with you. It's a great listen for sailors at all levels, I think. And the idea of being prepared when things go wrong and thinking about the role of complexity in safe sailing, these are themes that listeners are going to want to key in on.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my conversation with him. And there was a couple of things that I said, oh, yeah, that's a keeper. I didn't think of that. Dan makes a really good idea about that. So there's a couple of things. Let's see if you can find them in the podcast that I am now doing differently on my boat because of my conversation with Dan. So let's jump right into the podcast. Dan, welcome to the podcast again.
Thank you.
Just to refresh people's memory, you were on episode 131, where we talked about heavy weather sailing or sailing in winds that are sort of above our comfort range.
Right. I call it windy weather sailing.
Yeah, windy weather sailing. And that was a very good episode. I got some pretty good comments and feedback on that. So thank you for doing that. And today we're going to talk about a different topic that you suggested the last time we talked to each other, which is
what could go wrong.
Yes. What could possibly go wrong? And from like leaving the dock all the way through to returning to the dock, let's say, or maybe picking up a mooring ball, or we could even say anchoring. And, the list of things that can go wrong is infinite. So I think I'd like to try to characterize or put this conversation in two piles. One pile is, what are the things we can do to be prepared so things don't go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And then when something does go wrong, what things should I have thought through, hopefully in advance, that this is what I need to do when this happens? And I'll just share one little quip. Someone once told me, one of my bosses told me this many years ago. He said, Bela, it's amazing how lucky you are when you're well prepared.
Yes.
And I've remembered that for probably 35 years because there's a lot of wisdom in that to many parts of life. And I think it certainly applies to sailing. So dive in.
I've heard that in a similar way, where they say luck is where opportunity meets preparedness.
Yes.
The same concept.
Same exact concept.
So let's see. I was thinking, and I was thinking this as part of our last discussion, because when you're out there in bigger wind, there's bigger loads and more potential for things to break. And that's sort of the context that I in the first place, but it really can be generalized to any time you're out there, because something can go wrong regardless of the conditions. But in general, and I'm generally talking about failure of gear on the boat or components of the boat, as opposed to like a health emergency, which I'm not really qualified to.
Right.
I make sure to bring people along who are qualified for that, and hopefully I'll have the problem, and they'll be able to save me. And then
if not, they just take the anchor and tie it around your waist and.
Well, I do say, what do you do if the skipper falls overboard? And really, it depends on your relationship with the skipper. You may just throw them their wallet.
That's right.
But I always make sure I have the key to the ice cream locker, so I'll be recovered.
Very good.
So, but in general, you're going to have less problems with gear if you have less gear. So, I think the first thing to do to avoid problems is to simplify the way things are set up. Things should be absolutely as simple as possible. No extra complexity. Now you have to add complexity sometimes to get function, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's a trade-off. And if that function is valuable, it's worth adding the complexity. But otherwise, really, you should eliminate as much complexity. You mentioned airplanes in the last thing, and I think an airplane is finished when the design of an airplane is finished when you've taken away every possible thing that it doesn't need to fly.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a question about complexity. So a lot of newer boats have all the lines leading back to the cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
So that typically adds, a couple of extra blocks to get stuff back there. And now you have a rat's nest of lines in the cockpit as opposed to maybe up at the base of the mast. So what are your thoughts on that one, for example?
Well, and that's a good example of adding complexity for a particular function that has value. For example, with the reefing lines, if they all lead back to the cockpit and you can reef from the cockpit, then you don't have to leave the cockpit to put in the reef. And that certainly has value, but you're adding, like you said, complexity of the components. You're also adding friction to the system, which may make it harder to reef. But that's a trade-off you may be willing to make in that case.
Yes.
If you don't have all of the reefing gear in the cockpit, you probably shouldn't have any of it, because you don't want to have to go back and forth from the cockpit to the mast to effectively put in a reef. So you have to choose one or the other. All my reefing gear is at the mast. It's very simple, and there's not a lot of potential for friction. So I've minimized that, but I do have to go to the mast.
Yes. So here's an example of so what can we do, whether the lines all come back or whether the lines are at the mast. And I agree with you 100%. Don't mix those up. Don't have some at the mast and some in the cockpit, because then that's the worst of both cases. But what's something that you can do to help prevent things going wrong? And I think in this case, one of them is reefing early, because the loads are less, the sort of healing of the boat is less. If you happen to lose a line, the consequences are less. So to me, that's a great example of, when you're reefing for a reason, i.e. the wind's blowing too hard and the boat's not performing well, or it's heeling over, it's hard to steer. So you want to reef. And I think here, reefing early is one of the key things that you can do to sort of help minimize things going wrong.
Yeah, certainly. And, one thing, when something does go wrong, generally speaking, when something goes wrong on the boat from a gear failure, let's say you're going upwind and something breaks, if you turn downwind to like a broad or a wide reach, a broad reach, you can level the boat out, stabilize things, and it's a lot easier to address the problems when the boat's in a more stable state. You could also heave to, if that's an option, depends on what's gone wrong, right?
Yes.
But so, and that's also a good way to reef too, is to if you're trying to reef on the wind, boy, oh boy, that's
it's hard.
Could be a lot of effort in there.
So I think you said something there that I think is a nice little nugget, and that is, when something goes wrong, can you change your heading or direction that will calm things down, so to speak? And I think a lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah,
they just think
of course.
Okay, I'm on this heading, I'm going into the wind, I'm going to try to solve this problem while I'm beating into the wind and the waves are pounding over the bow. Whereas I can turn 120 degrees and, man, things are going to calm right down.
Yeah. And, but you also want to make sure that it's okay to fall off. Are you clear to fall off? Is there an obstruction? Is there another boat? Do you have room to do that? So that's sort of that situational awareness that you always have to have. So, and that comes up a lot. There's a lot of scenarios that I wrote down of things breaking. Said, well, okay, first fall off. So, but make sure that you can do that. So I sort of have these these failures listed with 3 things after them. One is what's an immediate solution. There might be several to the problem. One is how could you have prevented that in the first place, and the third is what should you watch out for while you're dealing with this. And the most common one to watch out for seems to be lines in the water.
Yes.
But that'll come up again and again. So let me just throw one at you here. Let's say you're sailing along upwind, and your sheet comes untied from the clew of the sail, like the bowline comes untied. What do you do?
That's a good question, right? I got this sail flopping around like crazy right now.
Yeah.
And so in my case, I can start to reef that sail.
Yeah, you could roll it
Right?
in.
I can roll it in. Yep. I can roll her up if it's my foresail. I can roll that up. Another thing I can do is I can if it's a hanked on sail, I can drop it real quick. All right.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe,
There might be a
right?
simpler solution.
I'm all ears. I'm sure you thought about this more than I have. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You could tack. Okay, so you tack, and now you take up the sail on the lazy sheet that's still attached to the sail.
Oh, okay. My
And then you
interpretation was I lost both of my sheets.
Oh, no,
But
I was just losing one sheet.
if I just lose one, you're absolutely right. Tacking, because now you have
So
a working
long-
sheet.
Right, so long as you have the space to tack and you're clear to
Yes.
tack. You can tack, then you can
Yes.
rerun that sheet that came off and retie it. But yeah, you have to make sure you're clear to tack. You could also fall off and let the head sail out, and that'll shadow or let the mainsail out to shadow the head sail.
Mhm.
And now
Yeah.
you've got that flogging head sail is under control, and maybe you can tie the sheet back on and you don't have to tack, because maybe you
Mhm.
couldn't tack. There might be a context where you couldn't tack. And the effectiveness of either one of those or any of those solutions is going to depend on sea state and wind and traffic and all these things. So you kind of have to have a couple of different ideas in there. But yeah, those are all good. What if your furling line breaks?
I worry about that one.
Yeah.
I tell you, I do, right? I'm rolling up my jib and the line breaks.
Yeah.
Now what do I do? And now the sail comes out completely, and I was probably rolling it up because I was either done for the day or I needed to reef my sail, which means I don't want a full sail out there.
Yeah.
So again, I could turn downwind if I have the room and to do that. That calms things down. Now my apparent wind is a lot less. So having a big sail out is not as big of a deal typically. And when I do that, I can, as you said earlier, I can let out my main to shadow my jib a little bit to make it even less wind on it.
Yeah. Always there being mindful that you don't run too deep.
That's
and
right.
get into danger of an accidental jibe.
Right. Right. So I think those are two things that I think about. What suggestions do you have?
I'd probably drop the sail.
Mm-hmm.
But when you drop the sail now, you have a roller furling sail, and you can drop it. It's only attached at the tack, and you have a sheet attached to it, and you have the halyard attached to it. So it's going to be free to flow right over your lifelines into the water. So you have to mind that as you bring it down and be prepared to lash it down on the deck somehow. I used to have on my old boat, I had a shock cord tied from the stem fitting back to the first stanchion, which was maybe 8 or 10 feet back, and I had a hook on the other side of the boat. And I would bring the sail down and bundle it up as best I could, and the shock cord was right there, and I could just bring it over and secure the sail with that. It wasn't a permanent solution, but at least it got it under control for the moment.
Yeah.
So I was ready for that. And I'm thinking, maybe I should have something like that rigged on the boat now in case I have to deal with that with my roller furling head
Yeah,
sail.
that's interesting because my previous boat just had a hanked on foresail.
Hmm.
So when you dropped it, it
Yes,
just dropped.
it was very
It was
contained, right?
yes, it was
So this
relatively
is another
contained.
example of a trade-off that you have there for the roller furling adds some complexity, but gives you some utility, some function that's valuable. Being able to roll the sail up is a valuable function, but it adds some complexity because the roller furling is a relatively complex device. But it also adds that problem of the sail being less than contained when it comes down on the deck. Um, there's a trade-off there that you're living with to have the convenience of the roller furling.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask you one, Dan. I'm sure this is on your list someplace, but if not, then we're going to talk about it anyway. So this is one of my big fears. I pull out of my slip. I'm going down the alleyway or the fairway, I should say, and it's a windy day and my engine quits.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do?
Can you unroll some sail so you can keep way on?
It's tough, I mean, it's narrow. Most
Depends on the
fairways.
direction too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one interesting thing about if you sail in close proximity to fixed objects, you really notice how much leeway a sailboat has.
Yes.
That you
You sure
don't really
do.
have to you don't necessarily find yourself accounting for that out on the open water.
That's right.
You do account for it, but you really notice it when you're coming up close to something like that.
Yeah. So the exit from my marina is probably about a half-mile long channel. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty narrow, and it's like really shallow outside of the channel. So I've often thought about what am I going to do if my engine quits when I'm either
Right.
coming in or going out. And what I always do is my anchor is one of those anchors when it sits up into its sitting area. It's got a pin that goes through it, so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't bounce around and you can't lose it or anything like that. But when I leave, I always pull that pin out.
Oh yeah.
So that if I have to drop the anchor, I don't have to worry about, hanging out over the front of the boat to try to pull that pin out. Because I always think about what I'm going to do if my engine quits in this narrow channel. I'm just going to drop anchor as fast as I can.
Is that going to make the boat spin around on the anchor?
It may, depending upon the wind direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's 8 feet deep there. The channel's 8 feet deep.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm in a 40-foot channel, right? Or 40
Right.
a 40-foot deep channel. It's
Okay.
only 8 or 10 feet deep. But that's sort of, I always make sure that pin is out when I'm leaving the dock. And if it's going to be rough, then I'll put the pin back in. And if it's not rough, I'll just leave the pin out and it's fine.
Right.
So that, but I haven't come up with sort of a good solution to what do I do if it quits while I'm going down the fairway into my slip or leaving my slip.
And does this fear make you more attentive to making sure your fuel filters are in good shape and
so
general engine maintenance?
Yeah. One of the previous episodes, a few episodes ago, Carter Jepsen went to a Yanmar school for 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And before he went, I said, Carter, I want you to ask one question. And that is, after you change your fuel filters, how long do I have to run my engine at the dock to know that I have all the air bubbles
Right.
out and that I'm safe to leave? Because that's what I've been paranoid about, right? I changed my fuel filter because I want to do the maintenance. I want to make sure my fuel filter is not clogged. But then and we know how thrifty diesel engines are, and I have an air bubble in there, and the air bubble shows up when I'm just pulled out of my slip. And he said, the guy told him 20 minutes.
Okay.
Right? Just run your engine 20 minutes. And if you run it 20 minutes, you don't have to worry about an air bubble.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have dual fuel filters?
I do not.
Okay. So a friend of mine is installing parallel fuel filters, primary filter, like a Raycor,
Yeah.
with a valve. He can switch
Yes.
between them. And if one of them gets fouled and stops the engine, he can throw it over to the other one and keep running. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I think I'd have that if I still had an internal combustion engine, but mine's electric now, so I worry about volts. I have to keep the
Yeah.
volts nice and clean.
Right. Right. Yeah, I've seen those dual primary fuel filter setups. They look quite nice.
Hmm.
But I don't have one, and they're quite expensive. Even if you try to rig one up yourself. But there's
Right.
some people that sell them kind of pre-configured and stuff. They look, and I've seen them on boats. They're great.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Do you have a jump starter, like a little battery jump starter?
I have a set of jumper cables
Mm.
that I can run from my house batteries to my starter battery.
Oh, you can't do that with a switch?
I can. There is a switch there, but I know in my brain I figured out a reason why to have jumper cables.
Mhm. Okay.
And
Well, there's this device you can get now. I mean, they've been around a long time, but now they're very compact with these lithium
yes,
batteries, and it can start a car engine. Should
yes,
not have too much trouble starting a boat engine. And I carried one of those before I went electric, um, and I still carry it because I can toss it to somebody else if they need it.
yeah,
Um, but it's great if the reason the engine won't start is because the battery has died. Now your previous scenario was the engine died, so it was already running. But that's just another example of a bit of gear that I carry just in case.
yes, yes. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and another thing that happens if the power fails, your instruments go out. How can you
Mm.
go on? And really, the answer to that is just sail without them and enjoy yourself because you really didn't need them in the first place.
And that works quite well if you're in relatively, I would say, familiar waters.
Yeah,
But I'll tell you, just
yes.
having spent 2 weeks on the intercoastal waterway, um, I without GPS, um, sometimes it's very difficult to see where the next buoy is. It
Hmm.
was it was surprisingly difficult to see the next buoy,
Right.
and that's why boy, I'll tell you, when I go to some unfamiliar place, I like to have a chart, a paper chart,
Hmm.
and I like to make what I call a little route sheet where I go, okay, here's buoy number one. What's my heading when I get there, and then between buoy number one and number three, or the next buoy, whether it's red or green, what's my heading need to be? So when I'm at the first buoy I go by, what heading do I want to go on to get to the next buoy? And then what
Right.
heading do I want to get to the buoy after that? Because I've been in lots of situations where I cannot see the next buoy.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's there, but because of the angle of the sun and the glare on the water, I don't know where it is. And if my GPS went out, I wouldn't have a clue what direction. I mean, I'd have a clue, but a clue's not good enough when
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
when you're in certain situations. So I like to have these. I call them route sheets. It's basically the buoy number, the heading to the next buoy, and the distance. So I have an idea of how long it should take me to get there and what my bearing is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have a deviation card for your compass?
I do not have a deviation card for my compass.
Okay, future podcast we can talk about how to make that.
Oh, cool. That'd be good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. That's just as a way. The deviation cards lets you correct. There are three kinds of heading. There's true, compass,
Yes.
and true magnetic and compass. And the true is pretty obvious. It's the true heading. Magnetic is what your compass will say. The difference being variation, which is external to the boat, and the deviation is the effect that your materials on the boat have on the compass. Like your big cast iron engine block may have an effect on the engine on certain on the compass on certain headings, and the deviation card is just correction factors for that, and it depends on what your heading is.
Yeah.
So that's something everybody should have if so they can actually steer by compass, and it can be significant. It can be like 5-10 degrees.
Is
That's
that
not
right?
uncommon.
It can be.
Oh,
It
yeah.
can be that large. Holy
can.
smokes!
It can. Yeah. My old boat had a cast iron keel, and that was had a great effect on the compass. I think there was 10 or 12 degrees of deviation. And the way you remember which is deviants are on the boat. So, so deviation is the last one you need to deal with. But yeah, you should have that. I think everybody should have that. So, but let's talk more about rigging failures. I have standing rigging failures, or I'm sorry, running. I mean, we'll get to standing rigging, running rigging failures, like lines breaking, and in general sense, lines break where at wear points, where they go over blocks, where there's a knot in the line, things like that, and a lot of lines they wear out in a specific spot because they're always going around a block right at that spot. I have a outhaul line on my jib because I have a jib boom, so there's an outhaul that runs to it, and the outhaul line runs from a primary winch in the cockpit all the way forward to a turning block at the base of the boom, and then back up the boom. So it makes like a 160-degree turn around this block, and then it goes up to the end of the boom, and then it goes forward to the clew of the sail, and the sail gets rolled out, and it sits there the whole time I'm sailing. That part of the line is always on that block getting worked and worked, and that's where it broke, right at that spot. And of course, what I did when that broke, I just rolled the sail in. And then I could re-rig another line. But there's something to remember when that kind of thing happens, like say your sheet fails on your head sail, or my outhaul on my head sail, which is equivalent to the sheet, and I can roll the sail back up, but now your sail is not secure on the furler. It doesn't have the sheet wrapping around it to hold in place. So you need to go and secure that with something. I always have extra sail ties handy. They're usually looped around the handrail in the companionway. So I have those always handy, and I can go forward and just tie that around the furled sail to keep it from coming undone on its own.
Yeah.
Now, if I have to tie a new halyard on, a new halyard. If I have to tie a new sheet onto the clew of the sail, can I reach that clew when the sail is rolled up? I don't know. On my number 1 head sail, sure, it's easy. It's like 4 or 5 feet off the deck. But on my number 2 head sail, it's like 9 feet off the deck. I can't tie a new sheet onto that with the sail rolled up on the furler because I can't reach it. So, those are things to consider when you're dealing with those kinds of problems. But I do like the high clewed sail for a lot of reasons. It provides me with a lot of visibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most efficient, but the visibility is very valuable. And there's a couple other reasons, but
so one of the things you said there that I think is another takeaway for me is you said you always have some sail ties sort of handy, and I assume the sail ties are the ones that have like a loop at one end, so you can kind of
either way
just yeah. So I mean, those that I don't have stuff like that hanging around on my boat.
Oh yeah, you got to.
I mean, I have them on my boat, but they're tucked away someplace.
Right.
So that's another keeper, as I call it, from a Dan keeper. So,
mine are hanging right on the handrail by the companionway inside, right next to my rigging knife.
Yes.
It's also hanging there.
Yeah.
Very handy. I can get to it. And the rigging knife is just a small knife with a really good serrated blade that I can cut through a piece of line, a loaded piece of line very quickly.
Yeah. See,
so
I
that's
always
close at hand.
I always carry a knife on on person. So I always have
Okay.
one with me. But the idea of having some of these, and I have sail ties, but they're tucked away. So
Yeah.
they're probably stashed in a sail bag someplace in some locker.
So okay, so another place that having gear ready to go to relieve a situation. Now, let's say you get an override on your jib sheet winch, and that can be an ugly thing. The sheet is loaded up because the sail is full and pulling, and you've got this nasty override. So there's a few ways. How would you deal with that?
I would try to first. I'd try to reduce the load on the sail.
Mm-hmm.
Either turning into the wind or turning down the wind, or whatever is most effective for taking the load off the sail.
Right.
Because oftentimes, if you can reduce the load significantly, you can undo the override.
Right.
And hopefully
Right.
not get a finger pinched in there. But
yes.
Yeah.
What if you're close hauled and you can't slack the thing enough by reducing the load on the sail to get the override off? What can you do?
Well, I can point into the wind, right?
Yeah, but if you were already fully tight with the sail, it might not slack it enough to get the
I see
override
what you're
off.
saying. Yeah.
You've taken up all the slack on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But I like that idea. I also like shadowing the sail with the mainsail going
the
downwind.
mainsail.
Yeah.
Right. And well, I can tack, because
You can't tack because you can't release the sheet.
understand, but there's a moment while I'm tacking, when I'm in irons, the sheet will be relatively slack.
It might be flogging too.
It will be flogging because I assume it's a
Yeah.
windy day.
Yeah. So I have a couple of things that I can use in this
Yeah, this is
situation.
good.
If you have secondary winches in the cockpit, you can take an auxiliary line, just a piece of line, tie it to the clew of the sail, run it to that auxiliary winch, tension that up to take the tension off the jammed one, right? And then you can untie that jammed one and free it if you have to untie it. Maybe you don't even need to untie it, but you can free the override that way. Now I don't have secondary winches in my cockpit.
Yeah, either do I.
Now but I have a bit of I have a tackle unit. It's like it's actually my original main sheet setup, which is a 4-to-1 tackle with a cam cleat on board, right on the block, and I refit that with snap shackles on each block, so I could snap that on to the clew of the sail. I might need a little strop, which I'll get to in a minute. I might need a piece of line to attach it to the sail, but I can attach it to the sail, attach the other end to a stanchion base, and crank that down. And maybe if I can get enough tension on that, I can relieve the tension on the sheet enough to untie it to clear the override.
That doesn't sound like fun.
Well, it's sailing, Bella. It's sailing.
Yeah, but man, I'm just envisioning that, right?
Yeah.
Even if I got the sheet in really tight, I got to go up on the downhill side of the boat. I got to tie something onto it, right?
Yeah.
That does, and chances
are. But
if
you fell off to a broad reach, the boat's fairly level now.
Yes.
And it's a lot easier to deal with that. So that's
Very
a nice
true.
way to deal with it. Now, how could you have prevented the override in the first place?
Well, pay attention.
Pay attention.
Right.
It could be that you don't have a proper fair lead to the winch for the sheet.
Explain that a little bit. Yeah.
Well, where the sheet leads into the winch, it should be coming in at a slight down angle from the rotating plane of the winch. If it's up too high, that can lead to the override problem.
Yes.
So
usually when I get an override is when the sail's flogging, and I'm pulling like crazy with my hands on the sheet to try to get it in, and it's just flogging and it flops up. Even though I have a lead that's down low, it's on the deck, and it still comes up to the winch. I have that angle, but it's still that's when I get my overrides, it seems.
Right. Right. So there's various reasons why these things can happen, just like there's various solutions to the problem. I have a friend has his boat. He has this bungee line that all the sheets go under it, so they can get a fair lead to the winch to
Hmm.
reduce the potential for overrides. And some lines are a little more prone to it than others too. Some types of line. So it may be that the line you're using for a sheet isn't ideal. Seen that
Hmm.
happen as well. And then if all else fails and you can't free that line, you got your rigging knife in your pocket.
Yep.
And then you're
Yep.
going to have a slightly shorter sheet. But
And a flogging sail. But then you can tack,
then you can tack.
hopefully, right? And kind of,
Right.
all right, now, and when a lot of these things happen, somebody once said to me, and it's really good advice that I try to follow. I'm not always successful at it. And that is, when something like this happens, you can almost always take 30 seconds or a minute to just kind of sit back and assess the situation and put together a plan of an attack.
Right.
Right.
And if you've thought about it in advance, that plan might be right at the ready in your mind.
Right. It might only take 15 seconds, not
Yeah,
a
right.
minute to figure it out.
That
But
could
the
be a
point
huge
being is,
difference.
unless it's committed to muscle memory, as they say, lots of times it's good to just, okay, because most of these are not super dangerous situations that you have to do
Right.
something immediately. You
Right.
almost always have time. I mean, after all, you're only going 6 or 7 knots. So,
I always tell people if they want to come out sailing, I'm like, yes, come on out. I will scare you to death at 7 miles an hour.
yes, very true.
But now,
Very true.
with the sheets on a head sail, sometimes people will take a double long line, as long as twice as long as the sheet needs to be, and attach it to the sail in the middle of the line. So it's really one line um, on the sail, and there are things I like about that because it's very compact. You basically have a loop at the line that's whipped into the line, and you can loop that through the clew, and it's very compact, so it's less likely to hang up on the shrouds in attack,
Mhm.
and that I see
Yes.
some value in that, but it lacks the redundancy of being able to untie one or the other of the sheets independently.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to that
And
kind
if
of
that
setup.
and if that knot breaks, you lose both of them.
Right, but it's not a knot, it's like a loop that you pass through. So yeah, but right, you have a failure point that's more
Right.
significant.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, I always have extra lines at the ready, maybe not in the cockpit, but I always have extra lines down below, easy to get at, or in a locker, or in my combing boxes. I have one piece of line that I keep handy that has a spliced eye in the end of it with a snap shackle. And
Mhm.
it's only like, I don't know, it's 12 or 15 feet of line. It's not a lot. Well, actually, it's probably more like 20 feet. But it's super handy for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing, in all of these situations where you're dealing with line and having to deal with a broken line or a line that's run free, like maybe the sheet is run out, it's escaped from you because you forgot to tie a stopper knot in the end of
Yes.
it. Well, now you have lines in the water. So, using the engine may not be an available solution to dealing with these problems, or available part of the solution anyway. That's that situational awareness. Anytime you go to turn the engine on, you better make sure there's no lines dragging in the water.
So I'll say a slight little additional thing on my boat, and I imagine on most boats, when I'm sailing, my prop is turning. I
Oh,
don't have a brake on my, and I don't have a feathering prop.
and you
Right. So
can't leave it in gear?
no, the transmission manufacturer recommends do not leave it in gear.
Okay.
They say let it turn. And I looked into this, and I found out all sorts of conflicting information, of course. And I
It depends on
finally,
the nature of your transmission.
Yes, but I went to the transmission manufacturer's website and they said, don't leave it in gear. So my prop is spinning. And so that means any lines in the water, even when I'm sailing, are bad.
Yeah. I have a book. It's called What Now, Skipper by Des Slatham and Andrew Bray, Tom Cunliffe, and Bill Anderson. This is about 25 years old, but they talk about, they present all these scenarios of things gone wrong. And in one of them, they were, somebody had fallen off the boat and they were trying to drop the head sail, but the person got the wrong halyard and dropped the mainsail, and it hit the other guy on the head, and then the halyard went over the side, and the guy had started the engine, and he was going to come about, and he was motoring, and the halyard got into the propeller and wrapped around, and the mainsail went back up.
Yeah, the engine pulled the mainsail back up.
Yes. It's just a cavalcade of errors.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, that it can be very dangerous though when a line gets around the propeller.
Yes.
So always to be avoided. Now, but that brings me to think about: have you ever sailed into the dock?
Not with my current boat. I have many times with my previous boat, which is Catalina 22. It wasn't a big boat, but the dock was my own private dock. It was a boathouse, so you know I sailed into it many times.
And you can manhandle a Catalina 22.
Yes, you can.
Yes. You probably couldn't manhandle your Hunter 45.
That's correct. Yeah, there's no way I'd attempt to sail that into the dock.
Oh. Okay. I sail into the dock 8 or 10 times a season just to keep in practice. But my boat's not my boat's 12,000 pounds. It's not featherweight. But when I do this, I typically have the motor at the ready if I need it. But I practice it because someday, I may need to do this.
Yeah. Well, I'll drop anchor and I'll call sea tow.
Okay. That's good.
Right. I mean, that's my scenario for that, because it's just the potential for me doing damage to other people's boats is immense in that situation.
No, I think if I had a boat that big, I'd be thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Because I'm 27,000 pounds.
Not a trifle.
Yeah, and just slowing it down, and I got to make 2 right-hand turns when I got to make a right-hand turn into the fairway and then a right-hand turn into my slip. And that's not something I want to do.
Right. Yeah. So one of the reasons I have the boat I have is because and not something bigger is because I feel like I can handle things better with it. I can handle the sails if I need to when things are ugly, whereas just 10 more feet or even 5 more feet would make that a whole different proposition. 5 more feet would make it a whole different proposition.
Yep, it sure does. And I've come to appreciate that much more now that I have a larger boat.
Yes.
Right, the forces and the weight, just the physical weight of things. Everything is just bigger and heavier and more of a handful to deal with.
And by the way, we didn't mention this on the last episode, but the wind speed or the force of the wind is a function of the square of the wind speed.
Right.
So 20 knots of wind is 4 times more energy than 10 knots. And even going from 12 to 15, that's pretty significant. Going from 15 to 20 is almost double. Like 15 squared is what, 225, 20 squared. Yeah, so it's almost double
That's right.
going to 20. So these things escalate quickly as the wind comes up.
That's right.
Yeah. So what if you're well, let's see. Your traveler's probably up on a cabin top forward of a Dodger.
my traveler's actually up on an arch.
Oh, on an arch.
Yeah, the hunters have an arch.
Okay.
So it's almost directly above my head,
Oh.
where I stand in the cockpit at the wheel. But
You must have some great shade.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, well, I have a Bimini and a Dodger and stuff, so I have 100% shade from overhead sun. But yeah, so my mast is up pretty high. So and the Traveler is up on this arch.
Okay. Let's say your Traveler was in the cockpit. And the Traveler, the bottom block of the main sheet came detached from the Traveler. Now that's where mine is, and I have had that happen. And my solution is I have a pad eye that I mounted on the bridge deck below the Traveler, right in the center of the boat, which is very handy for like harness hookups. But it's also there because I can take a short piece of line and attach that broken block or reattach that block that broke off the Traveler to that pad eye right in the center. So I'm prepared for that failure, right, by having that pad eye there. And I have pad eyes all over the place for that come in handy for various things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. See, when the first thing that goes into my mind when I think about these failures, particularly when they're about the sheets or the Traveler or something like that, or is can I roll up the sail?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's sort of the first thing that enters my brain. Is it possible for me to do something so that I can roll the sail up? So now I don't have this boom flopping around because it's not attached. It's not attached any place. Right.
Right.
And you can't always do that. But that's
right.
Just kind of true confessions here, right? It's sort of where my brain goes first. What
sometimes you have to get control of it before you can roll it.
That's
up.
right. That's right. I have to get control of it. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I could, if in that scenario that I just described, I could drop my mainsail.
Yeah.
And I have a rigid boom vang, which supports the boom. I don't have to worry about, and one of the reasons I have that is the performance of it, but also it supports the boom. So now I don't need a topping lift to support the boom. So I don't have to remember to tension the topping lift before I drop the mainsail.
Yeah.
Because I would forget.
Yeah.
So I could go up and I could go up and let it go and bring it right down. And my mainsail is fairly small, so it's not too difficult to deal with compared to some.
Yeah. Yeah.
And since my main halyard is at the mast because I don't have anything run aft, but when I'm letting the sail down, I need to be up there anyway to wrangle it. So do I really want it? I wouldn't want it in the cockpit. Maybe if I had lazy jacks, I don't know. I'm sort of on the fence about installing lazy jacks, which would contain the sail when it comes down.
Yeah.
And that has some value, but I stay away from it because I don't want all those extra bits of line running around potentially fouling things up.
Yeah, I don't have those on my boat, but I've been on boats that have lazy jacks. And in particular, when you're raising the sail, sometimes a batten on the way up will get caught on one of the lazy jacks. And, then first of all, you gotta be paying attention, which you should be doing anyway, but oftentimes you're not. And then, it's caught. Now I gotta lower it down a little bit and change my angle of the wind or something and raise it up again. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you have an electric winch?
I have one electric winch on the boat. Yeah.
And do you raise the main with that?
I have a roller reefing main, a roller.
Oh, right. Yeah. I forgot about that. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it relates to like, sometimes, getting back to the furling, we're jumping around all over the place here. Interesting.
That's all right.
If you go to pull in the furling and it doesn't want to go, I would never put it on a winch. Because now you've disconnected yourself from the potential problem. You can't feel that it doesn't want to go. You're just going to turn that winch harder, and you get a 48-1 advantage on that winch or something, and something's going to break. Now, I don't know. You may need a winch on your furler because the boat's so much bigger. But typically, if the furling won't turn, it's because something is getting in the way of the swivel at the top, or something is getting in the way of the drum at the bottom. And I will stop. If it doesn't come, I'm going to stop. Okay, I got to figure out what's wrong with this thing. Why isn't it rolling up? And I had a problem with a halyard, a spinnaker halyard. If I had it stowed on the mast, it would come down across the swivel at the top and keep the swivel from turning. So I just have to move that to either an outboard position or put it up forward on the bow, so it can't foul the swivel. And I've also had a pre-feeder. So I have a pre-feeder for the head sail, and it's just a little V-shaped thing on a piece of line that you run the luff tape through before it feeds into the foil on the furler. And I've had this always happens when I've just changed a sail, right? Because that's when I'm using it. I'll put the new sail up, and then I forget about the pre-feeder, and I don't tuck it away in its little storage position, and it gets tangled up in the furling line, and now I can't. Now the furling drum is jammed. So I've done that 3 or 4 times, and usually that happens when it's a little windier out, because that's when I'm messing with changing sails.
Right.
Right. Not always, but so I have to go forward to clear that, and then I can roll the sail up. But I never put my furling line on a winch, because I will break something if I do that.
Yeah. So I have, in general, here again, I like the ease of pushing a button on a winch, but you have no idea of how tight that line is. And, I try to listen, because sometimes you can hear when the winch motor starts getting a little more worked. But still, man, I've been in situations where, holy smokes, this thing is really tight, and I got to watch what I'm doing. And my other winches are 2-speed winches, and they're too on the kind of the speed that you have the greatest mechanical advantage. You can put a lot of tension on that before you realize how much is going there. So in general, I like to use, the part where I'm going to feel what's going on, because I think your point's well taken. If things are getting really tight, something's not right. Don't force it, because that's when you're going to break something. You're going to snap something and be in or jam something and be in even more trouble. And that's why I've now taken to particularly rolling up my sail, particularly my mainsail, when I'm hove to, because it just reduces all of the pressure on the mainsail, and I can just roll it right up into the mast, and it rolls up nice and easy. And I just have a line I pull on by hand. Basically, it's a continuous loop line, and I don't need to use a winch. I don't need to use anything, and it's just perfect.
Right. Yeah, and that's the nice thing about those continuous line furlers. You don't have like you reduce the pile of line, the spaghetti monster in the cockpit. That's another thing with the reefing running back to the cockpit. A lot of people like single line reefing. It's just one line you pull, but it needs to be twice as long, because it has to work the back of the sail and the front of the sail. And then you also have line to take up the slack on the second reef at the same time. So another thing that happened once with me, I was sailing with a reef in the main, and the reef line broke at the back. And my reef line, now I have I have what they call slab reefing, or jiffy reefing, I think they call it. There's one line at the back of the sail, goes from the end of the boom up through the kringle on the sail, back down to a block, and then forward. At the front of the sail, there's a hook. There's a ring that hooks onto a hook at the gooseneck. It's very simple.
That's exactly what I had on my Catalina. Yep.
Yeah. So the reefing line broke where it was attached to the boom, and I had a couple of options there. I could shake the reef out because I couldn't secure it, or I could have put in the second reef.
Mm.
I could have brought in the second reef and then dealt with the broken first reef line. The reason the reef broke is because I had it tied. There was a pad eye on the side of the mast, and I had the reef line tied to the pad eye. What I should have done is had the reef line loop around the boom, and the pad eye is just a guide to keep it in place, but it's looped around the boom and tied to itself with a bowline. Because then it's pulling on the boom. It's much, much stronger. I used that pad eye the wrong way, and it was an aluminum pad eye, and it just snapped right off.
Yeah, that's right. Because all the load is on the pad eye and the two screws that are holding it into the boom.
Yeah, it's useless. And then after it broke, I had this jagged thing on the side of the boom,
Right.
Which I took care of. But that's a risky thing to have.
Yeah.
On there. So
we're getting close to an hour here. So let's go down your list here and pick off some of the real good gems.
Let's talk about some of the gear I keep to deal with problems. Like I mentioned a strop, and a strop is just a loop of line. Okay, it's just a loop, and you can make one of those out of. You could take a piece of webbing and sew it to itself into a loop with maybe about 6 inches of overlap of hand stitched. I stitch those with whipping twine, very strong. There was an article in Practical Sailor a few years ago about the strength of that kind of stitching. It's worth looking up if you're curious about that. But and I can also make them out of say a piece of Dyneema that's a 12-piece braid. It's very easy to splice in eyes in that kind of line. There's lots of tutorials out there on the YouTubes and places for how to do this, and many of them are very good. And you can splice a loop in the end of a line, or you can take a piece of line and splice it together to itself into a loop. And these things are super handy. So let's say you needed to attach a block but you didn't have a pad eye. You only had a cleat. But the shackle on the block won't go over the cleat. But you can take this strop or this loop of line and run it through the cleat, and now you have a nice little loop of line that you can attach the block to. Very handy like that. Also, soft shackles can do the same kind of thing. And you can buy soft shackles. Or you can make your own. If you make your own, I would make a few and see if you can break them. There's some great videos. There's a video from a guy in Vancouver, Vancouver, Canada, and he did some testing. He made 50 of these soft shackles, and he broke them. He had them tied on a three-ton floor jack that he used to destroy them. Really interesting. Really interesting. And he found some of the ways he was tying these things reduced the strength of the line by about half. But when you're talking about a piece of Dyneema line that has a strength of 5,000 pounds, cutting it in half isn't necessarily a problem.
Right.
Depends on what you're using it for. But those are things that are really handy to have a strop or a loop of line like that. You can tie a knot and make a loop of line. It's not as strong. The knot reduces the strength of the line. I don't know how much a bowline reduces the strength of a line. I think it's 60% as strong with a bowline in it, something like that.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We live with that. That's not a problem. I also always have some good pliers nearby. I have these they're called parallel jaw pliers, and the jaws are smooth, and they slide like a channel lock, but the jaws are smooth, so you can use them on nuts and bolts and things, and they're really powerful grip, and they're great for pulling cotter pins. Things like that. Really great for pulling cotter pins. So I always have those and some needle nose nearby, the rigging knife, a marlin spike, which is, just this tool for untying knots, basically.
Yes.
I have some bolt cutters in case I have to deal with cutting rigging. Because
Yeah.
if the mast came down, I may need to cut some rigging. So I carry
Yeah.
some bolt cutters on board.
How big
Hopefully,
a bolt cutter do you have?
it's big enough for 3/8.
Okay.
It'll cut up to 3/8 because my biggest rigging is 3/8. Now it's 5/16 now, but yeah. So as big as the biggest rigging. And
Yeah.
there are other tools you can get for cutting rigging too that are purpose made for that. Some of
I
them
see.
used they used a little gas cylinder. Practical Sailor reviewed those too a while ago. I also have like all kinds of tape, duct tape, electric
Yeah.
tape, rigging tape, sail tape, all kinds of tape.
You have some of that underwater epoxy?
I have some of that. I've never tried it. But I would try it if I was in a position of having to.
Yes.
I've used lots of epoxy, gallons and gallons. I mean, I buy epoxy in 5-gallon containers because of the way I use it. But and regular epoxy will cure underwater. I found out because I had some left over and I poured the water in there and let it see what would happen, and it cured up. But
right. Yeah, it's a chemical reaction, right? Yeah.
it is. It is. Yeah. And I carry, like I said, lots of extra line for various things. I carry needles and thread, like sailmaker's needles and thread, and whipping twine and things like that. A friend of mine has they had the sail slugs pulling out of the mainsail, attaching the mast. So, okay, maybe carry some extra sail slugs, and some way to lash them together. Although I have a different setup now because I have a Tides Marine, what's it called, Strong Track, and it's this plastic extrusion that slides up in the back of the mast, and it has really nice stainless steel slides that slide in this plastic channel, and it runs really smooth and low friction. It's actually like made, I can reef on any point of sail because I have that.
Yeah.
I couldn't before. I couldn't before because there was too much friction in the mast track. And also I have like scraps of plywood that I can use to cover over a port light if the port lens broke, things like that.
Do you have those pre-cut?
No, I just yeah, I have some small pieces for just that purpose. Yeah, and various size pieces. They carry nicely. You can stick them under a berth cushion. They're easy to store like that.
Yeah.
But I've also considered like, okay, well, what if my we didn't talk about steering failure. There's a whole lot we could talk about with steering failure. I have my emergency tiller is always at the top of the locker. It's
have
always
you ever
the last
tried it?
thing.
Have
Yes, I have. I have tried it, and
they're awful.
you should be able to.
They're awful.
Oh, mine's great because the wheel is at the front of the cockpit, the rudder's at the back of the cockpit, so there's 4 or 5 feet of room there for the tiller. So it's really good on mine. But I know what you're saying. That some of them it's very complicated.
And it's I wouldn't want to steer the boat for a very long period of time.
Oh, right. Mine's almost as long as the tiller would be if the boat were tiller steered.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very good like that. And I think you should be able to access that tiller mounting without any tools. So there's a cover over the rudder post, and mine's like it's a clear plastic thing, so I can see the rudder post. It wasn't clear when I originally got the boat. It was just a white piece of plastic, but I got you can get them in clear, and I got the clear one, put it down there, and I have a little card that sits on top of the rudder with a line on it. And when I'm steering with the wheel, I'm like, well, where's the rudder? I have no idea. And I can look back at that thing and see.
Okay.
So, I'm all the way over at the lock. I shouldn't be there. So that's kind of handy. But I can unscrew that by hand to install the emergency tiller.
Yeah, mine's like a quarter turn hand release cover.
And you've tried it.
Yeah, I've put my emergency tiller in there. Yes.
You have a nice setup because you have that dual wheel and they're independent and redundant.
That's right.
And that greatly increases the reliability of your steering system. But it's good that you tried that. You should try all of these things when you don't need to.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. It's probably the best words of advice we have in this whole hour-long podcast is you should try all
Yeah.
these things before you need
When
to.
you, yeah.
Yeah.
I also always have some snatch blocks on board, which are very handy for jury rigging a line lead somewhere that
Yeah.
you might need. And I have ratchet straps that you attach things
Yes.
on the roof of your car.
Yep. I have several of those.
I
Yep.
have several of those. You can get those in stainless steel. I found some on
Oh,
Amazon, so I keep those on the boat for whatever they may be needed.
yeah.
And that tackle unit I described, which was it's just a 4-part tackle with snap shackles at each end on the block at each end. That was my original main sheet, and when I put a more powerful main sheet system on, but I kept this thing and I added the snap shackles to use it. It's also you see these as boom fang tackles. You can get one of those, and you might want to add more line to it so you can use it in a
Yes.
longer setting. But it's very handy in a lot of situations. I also use that in light air. I have a light air preventer that I rig, and
Okay.
it's not really meant to deal with an accidental jibe. What it's there for is to stabilize the boom when I'm sailing in light air and chop, because
Oh,
in
so it
those
doesn't,
conditions you get a
doesn't,
lot of dun, dun,
yeah,
dun. Yeah, it's horrible.
you get
And
that slap.
I just snug it down so that doesn't happen. That's really handy, and all that banging and slapping is hard on gear, and that's when things get broken
Yep.
when they're doing things they shouldn't be doing,
Or
or
that's when
moving
the
in ways
screws
that they
get
shouldn't.
pulled. That's when the fasteners get pulled halfway out and you don't notice it. And then the
Yes.
next time they come out all the way.
Yeah, and another thing I should mention, which I don't have a lot of detail on, but let's say a piece of standing rigging fails.
Yeah.
That's pretty serious. And I thought, well, what if it's a shroud or a head stay or a backstay? I said, well, okay, so it doesn't really matter which one it is. The course of action is basically the same. You have to unload that piece of rigging, whatever it
Right.
is. If it's a shroud, that means tacking so it's on the
Other side. Yep.
other side, on the leeward side. Um, and if it's the head stay, if the head stay came loose, you want to turn downwind. So you can, and release your backstay if you have that option. You want to unload that and then stabilize the mast with halyards, and then I'd get the sails down. I don't know if I get the sails down first thing. I don't know. They may help stabilize the rig. Um,
Yeah.
when you're going downwind, like the sails are going to pull the rig forward and take the load off that head stay. So maybe not take the sails down right away. I did. I don't remember where it was. Somewhere I heard a story about some rigging failure, and they immediately let the head sail go. It turned out to be the exact wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it was out there flogging away and just making things worse. So that's sort of a general rule of thumb. What are you going to do? Just don't make things worse with what you're going to do, first
Right.
of all. And you may not know. You may not know, but like for example, if you want to turn downwind, do you have room to turn downwind? Don't get into more trouble by turning downwind into a lee shore or something.
Right. Or run aground. And now
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
stuck
right.
and you have problems.
Yeah, but just in general with a standing rigging failure, unload the piece of rigging and then back it up with spare halyards. So I can tell you about my halyard setup. I have three. Well, I have four halyards. I have two jib halyards and a main halyard, and the spinnaker halyard was separate. But one of my spinnaker halyards is external, meaning it runs up the front, over the shiz at the top, and down the back, outside the mast. The other halyards run inside the mast. So if either my jib halyard or my main halyard fails, I have a backup. I can use that halyard to raise the main. I can use it to raise the head sail. So it's always good to have a backup like that. And I think if you set up your system so you can A lot of boats have a topping lift that runs up to the mast and down that you could use as a halyard if it
Yes.
has a suitable piece of line on it. And that's easier to do these days because you can have a 1/4 inch line that's more than adequate
Right.
in strength to raise the mainsail. So my halyard system has some built-in redundancy to it, and that's why I do it that way.
That's
I
nice.
could have run all the halyards internal, the second jib halyard, but then I wouldn't have this redundancy, and I'd also have another opening in the mast, which I'd kind of try to avoid having holes in the mast.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. So, and also another quick quip. The best way to and you talk about electric things failing. The best way to never run out of electricity is to not need it.
Right.
So the less things you have that need electricity, the less
Better off
likely
you
you're
are.
going to run out of electricity.
Yep.
So
You're
always have
absolutely
those
right.
backups.
That
Yeah,
goes back to simplicity. Right?
it does.
Right?
It
Goes back
does.
to simplicity. I never ran
Yes.
out of electricity on my Catalina 22.
Right. Right.
Because the only thing I had the battery for was the navigation lights. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
hardly,
I have a backup navigation light too, the red green for the bow. It's just a little battery power. It's like a flashlight with red and
Yeah.
green that I can go and clamp onto the pulpit if need be.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a handy thing to have.
Yeah. I had one of those for my little fishing boat that didn't come with any lights.
Yeah.
But I didn't keep it. I should have kept it now that you say that, because that would be
You can
very
probably get a
handy
better
to have.
one now that's LED and will
I'm
run for
sure.
days.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right, Dan. Hey, this has really been good. I found it to be very informative. I got a couple of keepers, things that we talked about that I have filed away and written down, and I hope our listeners have as well.
Well, I'll be interested to hear what your takeaways are when you wrap up with Mike.
Yeah, yeah.
It's always interesting. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, the straps by your companionway, that was one big one for me, because the sail straps.
Bella, when I put my head sail up, I take it up to the bow in the bag. I take out the bag. It has a sail tie tying it inside the bag. I put that up and I take that sail tie and I loop it onto the pulpit there and leave it there.
Yeah.
So it's there when I need it, when I go forward. It's a little thing flapping around there, but it's been very handy. I do the same thing with the main. When I take the sail ties off the main, I have these 2 sail ties. I just loop them onto the shroud right there and leave them there. And so when I go back to take the sail down, I haven't forgotten them.
Yes.
Because they're there already.
Yeah. Yeah. Great tips, Dan. And thinking of the future, I think another podcast that would be good for our listeners is talk about how you electrified, meaning got rid of your diesel auxiliary and put an electric motor into your boat. I think that would be a great episode that we can book sometime for the future.
I'll give you a teaser. It outperforms the diesel engine in every respect except for range.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think the same thing is true of most electric cars.
Yeah.
Right. So very good. Hey, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. I always enjoy our conversations. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you.
Cool interview, Bela. Lots of interesting nuggets of information in there. What were your main takeaways?
Well, I tell you, one of the things that impressed me with Dan is he is really very meticulous. I think he just kind of thinks through everything, and it's just clear from my conversation with him. Dan knows a lot about sailing. He's experienced a lot of things, and he always is looking for processes and equipment to solve an issue or a potential issue. And I think a couple of things struck me. One is situational awareness is key when you're sailing. And what I mean by that is sort of knowing what's going on around you and making sure you don't get tunnel vision and just focus in on one thing. This happens with pilots, airplane pilots as well, particularly private pilots. Something goes wrong on an airplane, and they get focused on that particular issue, and they forget to fly the airplane, and then all of a sudden the airplane crashes. Well, the sailboat's the same thing. The good news is you're only going 5 or 6 miles an hour, but still, you gotta steer the boat. And you got to make sure that's going okay, and you're not going to hit anything, you're not going to run aground, etc. And then focus on your emergency. So most of the times emergencies are not emergencies from a time perspective. You have time to figure things out. And so I think that's really important. Number one, situational awareness. Time is usually not super critical. On a few things it is, but on most things it's not. And don't just think about this. Don't sit down and say, oh yeah, Dan really brought up some good points. I'm going to think about this and make myself a list. That's good. Make yourself a list, but then actually go and practice it. Practice it at the dock. Practice it on a calm day. Practice it when conditions are sort of not in an emergency. And it's just like practice for anything else, any other activity, whether you're learning how to ski or play a musical instrument. You start building up that muscle memory, which then when it does happen, you're sort of much more in tune to what's going on, and you can move forward and take care of the situation.
Makes sense to me, Bela. And I really like Dan's approach, actually thinking through your equipment in the beginning, which is reducing the complexity to begin with. You reduce the complexity on your boat that's unneeded, and that has a effect on kind of safety and response time. And I think that's a trade-off that maybe people sometimes forget. You know, you're in the mood for buying the best and the coolest technology or whatever it is, right? And don't necessarily think about the impacts of what could go wrong when you layer on that technology. So I thought that this approach to limiting tech complexity was really cool. And point B, I kind of agree with you, is really practicing these scenarios. Like in strategy, you know, right, in businesses and in entrepreneurs, we encourage people to do scenario planning, right, to understand what might happen and be prepared, right, so you can recognize when situations start to happen and respond with a practiced hand. And so I love the idea of really practicing through and setting up equipment, right, to respond to scenarios on a regular basis. So I think that this is really it's mental training, and it's having the physical skills and tools around you to help recognize and respond to challenges both efficiently and effectively, which means fast and accurate, right? And if you can be fast and accurate with your responses, you can really reduce the risks. I think that, you know, being out in a sailboat on your own in the middle of a large body of water, right, with weather and elements and all of these things, it can really be risky. The approach that I thought it was great that you two took talking this through was really a way to reduce the risks involved in sailing. So I don't know. Yeah. What do you think? Maybe a top 5 ideas that sailors should probably commit to memory. Every sailor is different. Every boat is different. But for you, what were your top 4 or 5 kind of items?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I wrote down as sort of keepers for me. One of the things that is probably the most common thing that goes wrong is that a line breaks or something pulls loose, a fitting pulls loose from a deck, and now you have a sail flopping around because it's not controlled by a line or a sheet, as we often call them on a boat. So Dan had a couple of things. He had these sail ties he talked about, which is, if a line breaks, depending upon your boat, your sail can fall down. If a halyard, we call them halyards, if a halyard breaks, your sail will drop to the ground. So now you're in the wind and the sail's flopping around. Some sail ties can help you secure that really quickly. And as he said, he has them right in his companionway, not buried in a locker someplace. The other thing is he had various different pieces of rope. Some of them had loops in the end. Some of them didn't. And so here again, if something breaks, he can quickly attach something to a sail that's flopping around to help secure it again, or he can quickly attach it to a pulley that has pulled loose and get it tied down again so it's not flopping around and ripping around. There are these things called soft shackles, which is think of a pulley. A shackle is a pulley that a line can go around, so you can control the angle of that line, the direction it's pulling on something. And a soft shackle is basically a pulley that has a rope on the end of it with a loop. So you can take that shackle, the pulley, excuse me, you take the pulley, put it around something, pass the pulley through the loop in the rope, and now it's attached to that, whatever you attached it to. And now you can run a line through it. Those things are really great to have, because here again, these are the types of things that breaks on a boat, break on a boat. And the other thing is, I carry one of these on me all the time when I'm on the boat, and that's a knife. It's a knife with a serrated edge. And the reason it's serrated edge is it cuts through rope much faster than a smooth edge. Serrated edge will just rip right through a rope really quick. And sometimes you need to cut a rope because something broke, and you know, or you got a knot in something and you can't undo the thing. So I think that's a big takeaway, is always have a knife handy. Dan said he keeps it in the cockpit. I keep it right on me. And I think the other thing is this notion of, when something goes wrong, figure out how you can change the angle of your boat to the wind so that you can reduce the pressures and the forces on everything. Because that'll number one, it'll slow the boat down more than likely. And number two, it'll make things more controllable. It'll make it easier for you to go grab the end of that sail, or to grab the end of that rope that's flopping around and attach it to something. So that's almost one of the very first things I do is I try to assess, can I turn the boat 20 degrees in this direction or 20 degrees in that direction? And that'll sort of calm things down, reduce the pressures on the sails, reduce the amount of the boat's heeling over, and then I can try to assess the situation and get it under control.
Nice. You know, in the list of items that you talked about, none of those are particularly expensive, right?
That's
those are all fairly inexpensive, easy to access things. I mean, those would even make those of you that, you know, live with a sailor, those would make great little gifts or something, right? But for not a lot of money, you can add a lot of safety and security to your operation, right, through a small investment. So I thought that really struck me, as none of these are super expensive. These 4 or 5 things that you mentioned are cheap and easy to get. And can make a big difference. And it's interesting that those aren't standard kind of equipment on all boats, right? Always have these things mounted in these places. So it was really ingenious what Dan talked about. And so I was taken by a lot of these things. He had a lot of inexpensive ideas to improve the safety of the boat. So yeah, really cool. Nicely summarized. Great conversation. And I think this is, again, an episode that it's great to review every now and then, or to share with people who are thinking about starting to sail, or experienced sailors. Either way, right? Need this approach to simplifying what you're dealing with, and to practice, what might happen. And by practicing it, you kind of figure out what you need to do and why. And again, buying yourself a little time by not freaking out and jumping into something that doesn't need to. I mean, fire right on a boat, that's something that's immediate, right? But almost everything else, right, is usually you've got a little bit of time to respond, especially if you steer either into or out of the wind a little bit to reduce the pressure, so that you essentially build yourself some time. So a really cool approach, I think, that, and I love the back and forth that you two had in terms of, well, what would you do if there was this? Thought that was great. So that's kind of a back and forth that people can have all the time amongst a coffee or a beer over the winter while you're waiting for the sun to come out, and clear weather to happen. So really neat. I don't know. Any last thoughts on your side, Bela?
I think we should wrap this one up, Mike.
All right. So listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. We hope you found our conversation interesting and thought-provoking. And as always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com. And
if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that like or follow button on your favorite app. And if you have a suggestion, feel free to send us that comment or suggestion. We really enjoy hearing from our listeners. So that's it for today's episode. It's starting to get warm out there. I'm actually heading to the boat later this week to take the cover off and to wax the hull. So the warm weather will be soon upon us, and hopefully in a few more weeks, the boat will be in the water. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you all soon.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, Bela, I hope no surprises when you uncover the boat, and hope you have an easy time getting it ship shape. Listeners, thanks again, and we'll see everybody next time.